I believe in this team. Those are the words of Pat Riley, who spoke to reporters yesterday, just days away from the start of the regular season. We'll break down what Riley said about Jimmy Butler's contract, the goal for this season, and why he believes they can still compete for a title on this bonus episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a bonus episode of Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com, here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members who cover this team every day, and the best way to support the show is to leave a 5-star rating and review on your podcast app and join more than 14,000 Locked On Heat lifers by subscribing on YouTube. And we are here with this bonus episode on a Friday morning because, well, Pat Riley sat down with some of the local beat reporters, the Miami Herald, the Sun Sentinel, the Associated Press, and talked to them before, I guess, the unveiling of Pat Riley Court on the home opener on October 23rd for the regular season. So sat down with some reporters and answered some questions very candidly, I think I would say. He talked about Jimmy Butler's future and a couple of other things, but there's a lot to get into here, talking about how the Heat can compete in the Eastern Conference in a season that he described as a quote-unquote crucial year for the team. So the Heat are going into their 6th season together with Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, and Tyler Hero. And he was basically asked, hey, do you believe in this core? And why do you believe in this core when the rest of the Eastern Conference has seemingly gotten better, right, with what the Celtics, the Knicks, and the 76ers have done? And this is what Riley said about that. He said, quote, everything changes, I think, for the better with continuity and the fact that we believe in this roster. Does it mean that if we don't win this year or if we don't go deep this year, there are going to be massive changes? No, it doesn't mean that. But they should know that this should be a crucial year for them. They want to win. He added, I believe in this team. I truly believe in these guys. Bam, Jimmy, and Tyler, to some extent, maybe Terry, have to be better. It's always about how can you produce more? Can you be more? Can you be together more? I've seen the improvement, so I think we have a core of really, really great players who need to find another level of greatness. This is their time, so take the challenge, end quote. David, out of those bits, what sticks out to you?
A lot, obviously. There's a few things to kind of pick at there, but I think the first thing that kind of stood out is the hedging a little bit, because we heard as recently as 2 years ago that last season was the crucial season. It was a matter of proving that this group, and he said something that you've echoed a number of times, that a core doesn't usually stay together for beyond 4 years without a championship, without there being some kind of massive changes. They chose not to make those changes. Obviously, they tried to go all in for Dame Lillard. That didn't work out. And then we had last season, which was obviously not a very good one. But now it's, one more season, and this one's crucial, but that doesn't mean whether they win or not that there are going to be massive changes. So I'm not quite sure exactly what he's trying to say. I guess my feeling is that he's probably trying to instill the group with some confidence. He doesn't want the sword of Damocles or the trade deadline hanging over everybody's head and wondering whether or not, every time they step out in the court, whether or not their job is at risk. In reality, it is to a certain degree. That's the life in the NBA. You've got to be able to perform at a high level consistently, or else you find yourself out of a job pretty quickly. But I guess he's also trying to say, we're not looking at making any changes right now. We might not make any changes in the offseason. Kind of an acknowledgement, perhaps, of the new CBA rules and how it's bound all these teams and their front offices from making wide sweeping changes because there are incredible financial ramifications. So that's all tied together, I guess. I believe him when he says he believes in this team, but I also don't think that he resisted to making these changes should things fall apart quickly.
Yeah, I mean, we can't sit here and pretend that this team had not been going all in for Damian Lillard as early as last summer, right? As recently as last summer. So it's not as if this team hadn't tried to make changes. Damian Lillard, I think that, they were eyeing Donovan Mitchell before he signed the extension as early as he did this summer. Kevin Durant, going back a little bit further. This is a team that has tried to do stuff, but for whatever reason, and we've talked about the reasons a million times, but they have been, lack of a better term, stuck with Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, and Tyler Hero now for 6 years. And like I said before, a lot of the role players have changed, right? Like Gabe Vincent, Caleb Martin, Max Strus, like those guys are even like from earlier, Kelly Olynyk, Myers Leonard,
Or Andre.
Andre Iguodala, Jay Crowder, PJ Tucker, Kyle Lowry's not here anymore. And so
Right.
he has made moves around that core, but for 6 years, it's been those three at the top of this roster. And, I think there's a difference between shooting for the stars for a guy like KD or Durant or Donovan Mitchell, and maybe some of the other deals that have been out there and available to them these last couple of years that could be viewed more as sort of a lateral move. And when I hear Pat Riley talk about, resisting a tear down or rebuilding it or whatever, I think he's more talking about that stuff. Because I think Riley is like more like, yeah, if we can get Damian Lillard, duh. If we can get Kevin Durant, duh. Like that goes without saying, right? Like he's not gonna. But in terms of moving Tyler Hero for, and this is speculating, just throwing a name out there, Brandon Ingram, like
Right.
he's like, nah, that doesn't do anything for us. We're not going to make a lateral move for the sake of making a lateral move. We're not going to rebuild for the sake of rebuilding. And so when the options are not shoot for the stars, Lillard, KD, whatever, and the options are instead move some deck chairs around, or hey, we've got some continuity, and maybe that's the advantage that we have in an Eastern Conference that has gotten better. The rivals have clearly gotten better, and he was very candid about that. We're just banking on continuity. Like it's the best option out of the two options that we have, because that option of making that Karl Anthony Towns trade, perhaps that even wasn't there for us.
Yeah, I think kind of tying together with his assessment of the moves that other teams have made, he called it going all in. That was his way of kind of summing up the changes that Boston has made, that New York and Philadelphia has made to some degree. And it makes a lot of sense when you think about the history of Riley and the Heat. Like they've gone all in before, not just the big three, the acquisition of Shaq, even acquiring Alonzo Mourning and Tim Hardaway was viewed as kind of all in. At the same time, and NBA history proves this, as much as fans are in love with the idea of transactions and this process of going all in, that doesn't guarantee anything. Yeah, you want to be able to create your own luck by building and assembling a roster that's as talented as possible. But even when you do so, there's only one champion. For everything that we talk about, like let's just say for a recent example, Nikola Jokic, best player on the planet, MVP many times, great team in Denver, seemingly unstoppable. Well, they've got one title to prove it. Like that's it. They've got one title, and maybe that's one more than Miami's been able to accomplish.
They're the opposite.
But even
of
now,
all in.
Yeah, and even now, it looks like their window might be closing to a certain degree. They can still compete. A lot of people still view them as contenders. I certainly do.
Yeah,
but
sure.
A lot of things have to break right in order for them to do so. And I mean, we're talking about an all-time great.
Can I throw another example at you?
Absolutely.
The Clippers.
Sure.
They assembled Kawhi Leonard and Paul George in 2019. Everybody's like, oh boy, this team's going to rattle off the greatest wing duo since Jordan and Pippen and whatever. And how many playoff series, not even championships, how many playoff series do they have to show for it? And I do think that this is, if Pat Riley in his 30 years at the helm here has been anything, I think it's patient.
Sure.
And there's value to going all in. You have to go all in to win a championship. You need to have that star player. You have to. No team has ever won without that dude. No team.
Right.
You've got to win. You've got to have that guy. But if you go all in and you miss, then you're just broke, right? If you put all your chips into the middle of the pot and you fold, like Kawhi was not that guy for the Clippers. They thought he was coming off that 2019 championship. And by the way, you do what they did 10 times out of 10. But they kind of got screwed with this right knee of his. And if you go all in on the wrong hand, you're done for a very long time. And so even the Clippers letting Paul George walk away, they're still basically like, okay, well, we still have Kawhi, we still have Harden. I guess we'll just be a 500 team for a little while. And so that's where I think Riley has actually shown some prudence here is, hey, like I know everybody wants Brandon Ingram, Mikal Bridges, like whatever, I don't know, just players that have come up over the years, and we're not going to go all in for those guys. We're not going to do it, and we're going to if it's the right guy, we will try it. And I don't know, you could argue that maybe he did waste a couple of Jimmy Butler years where Jimmy Butler was capable of, Jimmy and Bam were capable of dragging this team, and if they had just gotten the right reinforcements at the right time, they could have made that run. I thought they did that 1 year with Lowry and PJ Tucker. If they would have
Yeah.
doubled down on it again the next year, maybe something changes, right? But I don't know. I think he's just being patient right now.
It makes sense. I think to your point, like if you're going to use two descriptors of Riley's tenure, it's patient but also opportunistic,
Yeah.
and the opportunities that fans want aren't necessarily what the front office views as game changing, and that's what we kind of have to perceive. Look, I will be critical of the front office, and I know some people may be even critical of us for carrying water for the front office and team, and that's not what we do. I've been critical in terms of a couple seasons ago. I thought at that mid-season point during the trade deadline, they could have shored up what was a clear gap in terms of positionality and finding a power forward, somebody, a body of some size that wasn't going to be taxed to the degree that Caleb Martin and Haywood Highsmith and whoever else they were trotting out there at the four, because they could have done something. And who knows how that would have made a difference when they were able to advance all the way to the NBA Finals. By the same token, consider the path that they got there with by relying on guys like Gabe Vincent and Max Strus. Maybe they wouldn't have gotten the opportunity. Maybe they would have been included in whatever trade package to acquire, say, the name du jour of that particular season,
Maybe,
Rui Hachimura or something.
You're talking like this, and when I was kind of talking about getting those reinforcements, I was almost like, what if they had done that prior to the 2023 finals run? I know they made the miraculous run, but like, what if they wouldn't have had to? What if they would have just been a top 4 seed in the East and had an easier path, and then Jimmy Butler isn't as taxed by the time he gets to the finals, and you still have playoff Jimmy in the NBA finals going up against Nikola Jokic. Maybe they come away with the 2023 championship, right? Like, just because they made the finals doesn't mean they couldn't have done it another way. So I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of what ifs and what ifing we could do here. But he did also talk about Jimmy Butler and his future and the decision not to extend him. We'll talk about that next year on Locked On Heat. Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen of the day. Best way to support the show, leave a 5-star rating and review on your podcast app. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube. David, this is our last podcast before the week in which the regular season starts.
Fantastic offseason of content, honestly. I really think so. I mean, I know sometimes people might say, "Oh, you're struggling to find topics," and there's
we did
certainly
at
that.
times. We did.
100%. I mean, there were some bleak moments there. If not for Bam and Adebayo being in the U.S. Olympics, there probably would have been a couple weeks in August where we had nothing to talk about. But other than that, though, like I think it was fair. Like it was better almost in a sense to have clarity early on, even as free agency was kind of passing them by. They weren't really capable of making any moves. There was some kind of joy in all that, that you don't have to be like following every rumor and every transaction and every possible link to a superstar. Even the fact that Donovan Mitchell re-signed with Cleveland early on, that was a huge domino fall early on.
We could have gotten 2 more weeks of content out of that, though. We really could.
Oh yeah,
we could have used it. But hey, look, I mean, rumors, speculation, all that stuff. Jimmy Butler was in the center of that because of the fact that Pat Riley called him out in May during his end of season press conference, pretty blatantly, and maybe even aggressively could be used as a word there. And Jimmy Butler clearly made it known through the media that he wanted an extension. And so both sides kind of went at it through the media. We're not going to give you the extension. I want the extension, or else I'm going to go find it somewhere else, whatever. And the Heat don't blink. And Jimmy Butler, Paul George signs with the Philadelphia 76ers, and Jimmy Butler says, you know what, actually, I changed my mind. I'm going to play out this season, no shenanigans, and I'll deal with this next year. And so, as a reminder for everybody, Jimmy Butler is still eligible to sign that extension. He can sign that up until June 30th. It's a 2-year, $113 million extension. Now, if he waits until next summer, he would opt out. He could opt out of his contract next year for $52 million, and then sign an even more lucrative contract, potentially. He's eligible to a higher maximum if we opt out next summer, which is what he at least aims to do at this point. But if you were to opt out and sign that contract elsewhere, then the Heat would and could potentially lose Jimmy Butler for nothing, and that is still very much a possibility. It has to be considered. And so when Pat Riley was asked about this, about the scenario of losing Butler for nothing, he said, quote, "I wouldn't want to. He's going to have the ability to opt, and we're going to have the ability to extend. So I'm trying to get all of that thinking out of our heads because it's living in the present moment and playing basketball. So if there's something that's going to drag me down or him down because of that, then we're not going to perform at a certain level. But I think he's embraced exactly where he's at. I think he understands where we're at. He went on to talk about Jimmy Butler's last preseason game, 24 points in 21 minutes. He goes, what I saw last night and what I hope to see in the future this year is somebody that has a chance to lead us to that place where we could play for it. I'm assuming, is a championship. That's all you want, end quote. You kind of referenced this earlier, David, about the fact that maybe some of this is just trying to put contract talk, speculation, trade speculation, whether you're talking about guys like Tyler Hero, whoever.
Yeah.
Just put that away for this year, because if this is the last year of this core, it does make the most sense to table all that and really go for it this year. And I think that's kind of, if I'm trying to, there always seems to be a message in like an underlying theme in Pat Riley's availabilities, media sessions. Yeah. And if in May it was, y'all don't play enough, then I think this one is, don't worry about all that outside noise. Let's really go for it this year.
Well, he says that in another quote. He says, I'm trying to get all that thinking regarding Jimmy's contract out of our heads because it's living in the present moment and playing basketball. So if there's something that's going to drag me down or him down because of that, then we're not going to perform at a certain level. So certainly they've got their eye on the start of the regular season and like, look, none of this is going to get resolved within the next week or so. It's not important to do so. He goes on to say that he's talked to Bernie Lee, Jimmy's agent, that he's had conversations with him, that he has not had conversations with Jimmy regarding his contract. So I think the focus is clearly, let's do what we can this year. And then next summer, we'll reconvene, reassess, and figure out where we are. Because by that point, we could look at multiple paths, but I mean, two at least very clear. One, Jimmy could break down. He could struggle again, not be available. And then his contract demands will certainly, they'll probably fall flat. And whether he opts out or not, that'll be up to him. But the market won't be there for an older Jimmy Butler that's not able to play at a high level for a certain number of games this season, or perhaps doesn't even push Miami to a deep playoff run. The other one is, well, guess what? Jimmy overperforms and maybe he exceeds those expectations and he plays 70-something games and they go on this magical deep playoff run, regardless of whether they win a title or not. Then that's the kind of prove it deal where you walk back into that front office certainly much more confident, and then your bargaining posture is certainly a lot better. So I think that's a smart strategy when you're looking at it. It's just, you know what, we're not going to take care of this right now. We're not thinking about it right now. We're moving on. We're focusing on the season, and we'll see how that plays out before we start having these conversations again. But I do think, though, like, he acknowledges Jimmy's personal struggles and the death of his father, and although he doesn't talk about it specifically. At the same time, though, I got the feeling, and maybe, you know, I'm just might be reading into it, that maybe his relationship with Jimmy is a little frosty in the way that he said he hadn't talked to Jimmy about things like this, but that he has talked to Bernie. Maybe they don't have the same kind of transparency or the same kind of chemistry or conversations that they once had. I don't know. Maybe that's just my reading on it. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. You want to be able to be on the same page, at least from a business standpoint, even if you're not necessarily friendly towards each other. I don't think that's necessary in order for you to win a championship. You can dislike people that you work with and still achieve your goal, whatever that might be. And I think that's still the case for the championship.
So I'll start by saying it's rare that a star player would even have that kind of relationship with somebody as high in the organization as Pat Riley. Like, the players don't tend to even talk to those people on a day-to-day basis. Now, Pat Riley is different. He is in the practice gym all the time. Right. I mean, he's the players still call him Coach Riley, right? Yep. And even though he's not been a coach in more than a decade now. So I think that's fair. I also think that Riley and Butler are very similar in that they both might not be the first mover in a relationship, right? Like, they're not necessarily the guys that are showing the warmth right away and being revealing, like being vulnerable to let somebody else be vulnerable. But I don't think it's a problem. I think they're both pretty stoic in what they do. Pat Riley did say, like, he's a very intelligent man. I don't need to talk to him. And by the way, players don't, like, it's not with these contract situations. Players don't want to sit down in an office and talk about it. Like, that's the last thing a player wants to do. Yeah. They want to be out on the practice floor, you know, putting up 3-pointers and you know, practicing and scrimmaging and stuff. They don't want to be talking numbers, you know? Right. So it's not rare that Pat Riley, and not rare in the NBA world in any regard, that Pat Riley or somebody in, like, a general manager or a president of basketball operations wouldn't be talking directly to the player. The player has an agent for a reason. The player is probably thinking like, I give this guy 10% of my check for a reason. Let him take care of
Yeah.
this. I do the
Go earn it.
basketball stuff. So,
Right.
yeah, I didn't read too much into that. I was like, yeah, that's why Bernie Lee is there. It's to take care of this for Jimmy.
A couple other things then that he said, like, I think he's
Can we
done
talk
this
about? I'm sorry, because I didn't want to move off the dad point, because I thought there was a question. We talked about this after it was revealed on the Netflix series. Like, did they even know about this, or to what extent
Oh,
did they
yeah.
know about it? How long did they know about it? And we knew that they knew about it, but for Pat Riley to acknowledge it on the record and say, like, we knew that this was going on for a while, and we knew what he was going through in the personal turmoil, and even started talking about how he lost people in his own personal life, and that it could be hard to perform. I did read that as a little bit of an olive branch to be like, we understand what you were going through, but business is still business. So as to an extent of an olive branch that may be, I guess. But you were pretty critical when we were talking about this last time, how it's like you thought maybe Riley was going too hard on Jimmy in May during that press conference, given all that Jimmy had gone through. And I don't know, I still look at this and I'm like, yeah, man, like Pat Riley's he's wearing the Armani suits, man. Business is business.
Yeah, I don't want to play couch psychologist too much, but I guess that's kind of what I've done throughout my career here.
Let's do it. We have a podcast.
Yeah,
That's what we're.
No, at the same time, I feel like that's probably the result of Riley's Schenectady background. Where being roughed up by your parents was pretty normal, and you kind of had to grow up on the mean streets and toughen up. Just the approach to life.
Yeah.
General approach is, be tough, and the way to toughen you up is I'm going to toughen you up, and you're going to have to figure it out and respond. And you kind of learn at that point. And I think we've seen this from Riley, is that there has to be a certain amount of compartmentalization of your emotions. You can't just be distracted by those kinds of things. Like, even as he's talking about the own losses that he's felt over the recent years, he's acknowledging Jimmy's, but he's also, well, guess what? Despite all that, we still got to figure it out. So I still am somewhat critical, because I think you could show a little bit more empathy in those moments. You don't necessarily have. I think, going back to what I said about Riley and Jimmy following the revelation of his father's passing, Riley could have handled it a little differently. He was really hot under the collar to hear Jimmy's comments, because he interpreted it, and not in a way that I had. I think we were sitting in that media room listening to Riley in his end of season press conference, and the way he reacted to Jimmy's comments that had he been out there, they would have beat Boston. Riley seemed to interpret it as, well, you're knocking the rest of your team, and that's just something you don't do. You don't throw your teammates under the bus. And if you do, well, then guess what? It's because you weren't there, and you weren't there because of X, Y, and Z. This was your fault. And so I think that's where those comments from Riley came under there. They were spoken from a heated moment where he was really upset with Jimmy for what he perceived to be throwing his teammates under the bus. Having said that, again, you have to find the right balance, because you can't attack Jimmy publicly, which is how we all interpreted it at the time, and know that, well, he wasn't as available for most of the season, or for part of the season, because he had this huge emotional issue that was weighing on him for a lot of it. So it's something that even at 79, and I think that speaks to all of humanity, we can still learn how to do things better. Riley has pushed a lot of players away, and this isn't news here. Like, people get tired of the things that he does. Even as much as he talks about Magic Johnson as his son almost, and is so grateful to him for all the things that he did, Magic was okay with Pat Riley being let go by the Los Angeles Lakers. And that's something that we kind of tend to obscure or overlook, because that seems like ancient history. But Magic, he talked to Dr. Jerry Buss, and Buss was like, we got to make a change here somewhere, because we're not winning. And Magic's like, well, all right, if you got to make a change, you got to make a change. That means Riley's got to go. And that's fine, because Riley's style of pushing and pushing and pushing, as inspirational as it has been and as much success as it's created, has also ruffled feathers, because it's difficult. It takes its toll on you over the course of many seasons. So I think this is just something that has happened. We all look at 2014, and have you got the guts? Yeah, 2016. We're going to hardball with Dwayne Wade, play hardball with Dwayne, And guess what? He's now in a Chicago Bulls uniform, et cetera. So, like, this has happened before. It's going to happen again for as long as Riley's there. And I think that's another point that we should bring up, is that Riley has no intention of retiring. There's no plan of retiring anytime soon.
Even asked
And you're gonna,
Mickey Arison when it was revealed that the court was going to be named after. There's like, is this a subtle acknowledgement that, hey, maybe you're trying to push me out? Is this like the last hurrah? I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah. No, I think it's, look, no GM has been perfect, but Riley is as good as it gets. And I think that's something that a lot of fans are frustrated with and overlook at the same time, is like, nobody but Riley might have been able to pull off the coup of 2010. And yeah, it certainly helped. It was a huge factor to already have Dwayne on the roster, but that doesn't change the fact that it happened, and that a big part of it was being Riley and being in that front office and being able to secure that. And prior to that, it was the acquisition of Shaq, a move that a lot of GMs probably wouldn't have made when you're trading away a young player in Caron Butler that you just drafted, another guy in Lamar Odom that played one season and really wanted to play, and still to this day talks about Pat Riley as a father figure. I mean, there have been moments over and over again where Riley has made the hard decisions and they've led to success. And so I think that kind of that overtakes any other issues in terms of him perhaps being a little gruff and maybe even forcing some guys out or being a little abrasive.
So, in sort of the theme of forcing guys out, I guess this isn't news either, but when I hear this media session, when we're reading these quotes, the door is certainly open for this to be it. I think he's saying, you're 6, you don't really get here for a lot of cores don't usually get here. We have a lot of continuity, all these things. Eric Spoelstra has talked about the fact that this is like a rare thing in the NBA, and that they feel like they could really pounce on something here and use that continuity maybe to propel them through the Eastern Conference, where these other teams are making these offseason moves, and those are what they plan to propel them through the Eastern Conference. And so all of that is true. I think that might, again, it's sort of it's the best option of the options that they had, which were limited based on how basically the Pat Riley and his front office has constructed the roster, which I do think that there's some fair criticism for some of the salary stuff that they've put themselves into, but they also probably didn't see the second the CBA coming in with the second apron and all that stuff. Like, nobody saw this coming. So all of that said, yeah, this could be it. This could be Jimmy Butler's last season in the Miami Heat. It also might not be, right? Depending on how things go, maybe there is another contract for him in Miami. Right. And I think we've gotten that sense. I certainly have, just being around this team so far in media day, training camp, preseason, whatever. There is sort of a let's just go for it sort of mentality. Like, screw it. Our own stuff can sit on the side. Contract for Jimmy Butler, Tyler Hero trying to be an all-star, even Bam with some, like, I know he still wants to be Defensive Player of the Year and stuff, but he's sort of just like, he's not talking about it in the same way anymore. Like, nobody everybody's just sort of put their own stuff to the side, and they're just sort of going for it now. And easy media day, bonding in the Bahamas, preseason where everything's good vibes and everybody's shooting threes and playing fast. It's going to be different. There's going to be dog days, December, January, February. It's going to be tougher. By the time we get to the All-Star break, we'll see how these guys are feeling then. But for now, I'm kind of liking the messaging a lot. And you know me, I'm skeptical. Skeptical. I think I might be like the most skeptical person with like a platform like this. Like, I think that's sort of my thing here.
Yeah.
I can't help but be really encouraged by what I saw in the preseason and what we've been hearing from the team. And so I'm excited, man. Like, I'm excited for this season.
I agree. I think I tend to be on the more optimistic end of the spectrum, but I think the approach has been a sound one. Like, and we're seeing it not just in words, but in deeds, and that counts. Like, the fact that people are supportive of one another, that it has not just been the absence of tension, but the focus on building each other up and being supportive of putting your personal wants. Like, I mean, we're talking about Riley, and this is the focus point of the whole conversation. And he wrote about the disease of me and how that can impact teams, like even championship teams, because everybody has their own individual goal. And I'm seeing the opposite of that. Like, it's not the disease, it's the medicine of us, because we're kind of the power of friendship, if you will. I mean, that could be it's kind of hokey and cliche and everything else, but at the same time, I think it works. And I think it can mean something positive. And again, you're going to be tested, but having that foundation, and I've referenced it before, but what Duncan Robinson told us at Media Day about having that foundation is so important, because you're going to go through these struggles. At the very least, you want to have that kind of platform to build on of support and friendship, and that we get along with one another, and that we're all in this together. So I agree with you 100%. I think it's a great point. I think they are looking at this season as, let's give it one more run, and then we'll figure out what happens next in the offseason.
That's future us problems, right?
Yep.
Programming note really quick. This is our last episode for the week, a bonus episode, but it is our last episode for the week. We are not going to be recapping the preseason finale and Memphis tonight because half the Heat's roster isn't even going to it. No Jimmy Butler, no Bam, no Kevin Love, no Duncan Robinson, a bunch of other names. Basically, it's Nikola Jovic, Haywood Highsmith, and Jaime Jaquez. So good luck, guys.
Who has a monster game of all the reserves? Who has the biggest game? It's one of the two-way guys, I imagine. Josh Christopher finally breaks.
It might be finally like Josh Christopher getting something to go in the basket.
Yep.
Maybe Nasir Little finally makes a corner three.
Yes.
So we will be back Monday morning with a new episode of Locked On Heat. In the meantime, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app.